Welcome. This is Mr. Perry. Miss Francisca has you on a new track. It's called Evolution and Natural Selection. I think you'll enjoy it. She has a number of questions that she'd like you to answer and a number of videos which you should be watching as well. And if you'd like, read along with me, and I think you'll enjoy it. Once again, Evolution and Natural Selection. Says Charles Darwin, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Evolution and natural selection. What is evolution? How different kinds of organisms have developed or diversified over time from earlier forms throughout the history of Earth. Diversify. Diversity. Many different varieties of the same organism. So the question begs, how and why did organisms change and develop throughout history? Charles Darwin, born in 1809, died in 1882, was a biologist and naturalist known for this theory on evolution and natural selection, and for his book, The Origin of Species. His radical ideas were formed after traveling the world on a ship called the HMS Beagle. He collected fossils and wondered why species died out. He spent 5 weeks on the Galapagos Islands and collected several species, including many bird species called finches. His observation of finch birds and other organisms led him to believe that organisms can adapt to their surroundings to help the species survive over time. Galapagos Islands. Darwin noted that the same kind of animal differed or varied from one island to the other. For example, tortoises that ate plants near the ground had rounded shells and shorter necks. Tortoises on islands with tall shrubs had longer necks and shells that bent upward, allowing them to stretch their necks. Darwin began to think that organisms evolved adaptations that allowed them to live in their environment. What is an adaptation? A process of change to become better suited to the environment. And evolve is changing over time. Darwin studied finches from the Galapagos and saw differences in size and shapes of the beaks of finches from island to island. Some birds' beaks were thicker for cracking seeds, while others were longer and curved for eating insects. Darwin realized that each finch evolved based on what their food choice and their surroundings were. From this, he came up with the theory of natural selection. And there are our finches, and they have different beaks. Lamarck's theory of acquired characteristics. Traits altered or acquired during an organism's lifetime could be directly passed down to that organism's offspring. This idea was later disproved. An example, Lamarck believed that giraffes' necks became longer because they had to reach high for leaves. He believed that a giraffe, in its lifetime, could keep stretching its neck and therefore get a longer neck. He believed the giraffe that stretched its neck longer could pass that trait on to its offspring. Another example, if Lamarck was right, then if you worked out with weights and became super buff, then had kids, all your children would have big muscles too, which is not true. Darwin's theory of evolution. Diverse groups of animals evolved from one or a few common ancestors. Survival of a species depends on natural selection and survival of the fittest. Natural selection. Organisms better adapted to their environment tend to compete, survive, and produce more offspring than those less adapted. Survival of the fittest. Individuals with genes that allow them to compete better in a certain environment against other individuals will survive. And species. Similar individuals capable of breeding and producing fertile offspring. That is, meaning the offspring are capable of reproducing as well. Natural selection, how it works. Now, Darwin's theory of natural selection for giraffes' long neck goes like this. Within the population of giraffes, some giraffes have short necks, some have medium necks, and some have long necks. Over time, the environment of giraffes had trees with higher branches. All giraffes were competing to get leaves, and those giraffes whose necks were longer were able to get leaves on higher branches. Those giraffes survived and were able to pass on their long neck genes. Before the Industrial Revolution in Britain, most peppered moths were of a lighter color variety. This meant that they were camouflage against the light-colored birch trees that they rested on. Moths with a mutant black coloring were easily spotted and eaten by birds. This gave the white variety an advantage, and they were more likely to survive to reproduce. Now, over time, air pollution in industrial areas blackened the birch tree bark with ash soot. This meant that the mutant black moths were now camouflaged, while the white variety became more obvious to predators. This gave the black variety an advantage, and they were more likely to survive and reproduce. Eventually, the black peppered moths became far more numerous in urban areas than the white variety. And there you see it. The white peppered moths, the dark peppered moths camouflage well against the pale birch tree and against the darkened birch trees in the city. Okay, so there are your first 12 slides. Should give you some good ammunition to answer those questions Ms. Von Trisky gave you. And go to it, get it done. And if you don't get it all, watch your videos once again or listen to this once again. Read along with me. Hit it and quit it.